This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Damon Lembi. And you're a two-time best-selling author and host of the Learn It All podcast and CEO of Learnit. And we'll welcome you to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's always fun to talk to people from around the world. We've been podcasting since 2016. So this will be like our episode. I think we're at 1,180 today.
Oh man, that's a lot of episodes.
So it's fun to talk to people who have different points of view, and you got an interesting premise that we're going to talk about is why great leaders are learn it alls versus know it alls, which I think is a cool thing because my side gig, I am a software business analyst. I've been in the industry, financial tech, insurance for 25, 30 years. And I have some opinions about your point of view there, but I want to hear what your story is. So before we get to the heart of your story, every time I talk to somebody, I ask them, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Great. So I would say what motivates me, and I'm referring mostly to work right now, what I do at Learnit, a live learning platform, is my team. I love my team. I love helping them succeed and do well in their jobs. Number two is our customers. I love being able to help people develop into leaders and confidence and be successful in their careers. And then most of all is my family. What motivates me is I got a great wife and two little kids, a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, even though I'm kind of an older dad. And so I'm motivated. I want to give them a great life, just like I was really fortunate to grow up in a home where my parents did a lot for us. So those are what motivates me to do what I do.
Well, I think it's a good premise to be in, like somebody that's trying to pay it forward and also, teach people and learn from the things that, lessons learned, in software industry. That's what we do. Like, we live in a world where everything's incremental. I started in a world that was all kind of waterfall. You had to try to know everything. But now we live in a world where, hey, version 1.1, 1.2, 1.4, 1.5, whatever. It's like we don't know what we knew. Now today we know it, and we don't know what we know tomorrow. And so there's a willingness to understand like the limits of, I can't know everything, but I should try to be open to it, right? Instead of being somebody that thinks that they have it all handled, which I don't think anybody has it all handled. I mean, like you have to have a strategy to handle it.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And, there's learn it alls and there's know it alls, the way I look at it. And, not everybody is 100% learn it all or 100% know it all, but know it alls typically, like you said, they come to the game and they feel like they have all the answers. I've got it figured out. This is how I've always done things. They're not open to being flexible and learning and hearing diverse opinions. Where on the flip side of that, kind of like what you're talking about in the software world is, you have to be open and flexible and adaptable, really, because things are always moving and changing. And quite frankly, I agree with you. Nobody has it all figured out, and anybody who says they do, I think is fooling themselves, but not really fooling other people, right? Because I think everybody realizes that, hey, we can't have all the answers to everything.
Yeah, it's like, I try to merge like my left brain, right brain, because I'm a creative, right? So I'm in my music studio. I do music, I do creative work, and I find this really interesting dichotomy. The industries want creative people. Creative people tend to be kind of neurodivergent, different. We don't always fit in the box. So, I've been in an organization that said they wanted a person like that, but it really didn't.
Right.
Because they wanted you to fit in the box. And when you didn't fit in the box, they kind of punished you for it. And they didn't really want to hear it, even though they said they wanted to hear it. So how do you, when you start to realize is like, hey, I need to find my own tribe that I resonate with.
Yeah, I think you kind of learn it over time, really. I mean, let's look at it from a leader's perspective, because I think it's important. Let's say you're running a small business or you're running a team. I mean, your people are most important. So you want to be able to go out and you want to hire great talent. Now, the worst thing you could do is just talk about what you're saying, is hire these people and then put them in a box, right? And say, you just have to do this and you have to do it this way. Well, why would you bring on such talented people if you're going to do that, right? If you're going to micromanage them and limit their creativity, I think great leaders understand that they want to give people autonomy and give them, give them some room to learn and grow. And if they fail, hey, you know what? Let's say I have your back. Let's figure out what we could do different next time, and let's use this as a learning opportunity and keep getting better.
Yeah, because I'm a big I don't know, purveyor of the happy accident. You know, it's like when
Mhm.
you're like an inventor, sometimes like you can have a plan, and not that you don't go through life without a plan, but you're open to kind of like the universe throw things at you. Like as a musician, a lot of times what happens, like you're in the moment, you're like a fusion jazz guy, like a Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock,
That's awesome.
and something comes to you and you take your 10,000 hours of playing the bass or trumpet or whatever, and you learn how to handle that moment. And so when somebody like Herbie Hancock plays a chord that you didn't expect, you don't stop the song, you evolve the song. It's a different type of mindset than maybe a classical musician that's like reading the Bach and the Chopin that expected to be exactly what it was written on the page, right? Not that that's not a good process to follow, but then you don't get into new territory if you're always in the same place.
Well, let me ask you this. Is that something you learned over time, being able to kind of go with the flow as a musician when a note change? I mean,
Yeah, it was
I'm a huge
improvisational.
music, I'm a huge music fan. But I don't play any instruments. I just really appreciate live shows and live music. But yeah, is that improv that you're able to do there? Is that just something you were able to learn over time?
Well, what I found is, being a musician, I can read, I can sight read. But what I found is like a lot of times, like you could write something out you could be a writer and you could write the song out. But when you put anybody into the writing session, what happens is a lot of times the stuff that you wrote down that you want the other person to play actually isn't the right thing for the moment. It involves like trust. Like
Hmm.
there's a certain level of trust, and some people don't trust people, right? So when you're in a group where everybody has like ability to actually contribute rather than top down, I'm gonna say, like I know there was a situation with the Eagles where they kind of said, "This is the way it's gonna be. If you don't play Hotel California note for note, you're gonna get a fine." Right? Well, why would you want Joe Walsh to play it note for note? Why
Right.
would you want him to do that? Seems kind of crazy. But it's like, okay, if you want him to do that, they'll do it. But that's not probably why you should have hired him.
Well, I'm a big Eagles fan, but I bet Don Henley and Glenn Fry were probably not the easiest guys in the world to work with, anyways, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I mean, sometimes you have a vision, you want it executed. You want somebody, you have somebody there and it's work for hire versus an actual contributor.
Right.
Right. So it's work for hire. You don't own it.
And
You
that's
don't
and
own
it
it.
kind of goes,
What do you believe?
yeah, and I think that translates into the business world as well. Like, you have a vision, you have some goals of what you want to do, but are you going to be the type of leader where you have to do it this way, you have to play the note, you have to run your sales meetings the same way all the time, or are you going to give people the autonomy to show up as themselves?
Yeah.
I mean, show up as themselves and be their authentic selves to service your customers or the rest of your team. And I quite frankly think that if you can create an environment, a psychologically safe environment where people show up as themselves, to a degree. I mean, there's certain things that obviously,
Yeah, you can't do.
people can't do, but if you can feel comfortable enough to be yourself and not scripted, I think you're going to be much better off.
Well, it's a matter of, there's fear, there's safety, and
Mhm.
there's like, uh,
Trust.
trust, right? So the problem is a lot of time people will play it safe because they're scared that if their actual true like voice is out there, that what they're gonna get hurt, right? Because they're gonna get like their idea is gonna get pushed down, so they don't want to risk the unsafe treading water of like I put my soul out there and then you just tore it up. So it's hard to get to a place of that safety unless you're in an environment where, yeah, you can throw it out. Like you think about, Frank Zappa and a mother's invention. They was like, oh yeah, you guys can just throw this out, right? You
Yep.
can do that because I'm giving you the environment where you can do it, right? Or Sun Ra, giving you the environment where guys can ramp up and step up. You get to these like places like Apple, Steve Jobs. He wanted people who thought outside the box. It's like in the IT industry, like it's like his speeches are like epic about. "Hey, I don't want a bunch of bureaucrats doing stuff. I want people coming like bottom up. I want 'em not afraid to put the ideas out and throw them out on the throw them out and throw them on the dartboard."
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I also think Steve Jobs was pretty demanding.
Oh yeah,
Um,
he's like
but what
super fan.
super demanding. But yes, I think you bring up a really good point, and I talk about this to customers and friends I know who run businesses. Is you want to create an environment again where everybody in the organization feels like they have an opportunity to share ideas and innovations and be creative, because a lot of times the best innovations are going to come from your frontline people, the people who are, working with the customers on a day-to-day basis, not the C-level executives who are
Yeah,
up in their skybox, right? And if you allow people to come to you and say, hey, here's some ideas, and you're not like, oh, this is a stupid idea, forget it, that's dumb. But if you listen to them, and you don't need to implement them all the time, but if you do implement them, and I think even more important, if you give them credit for what
yeah,
what,
yeah.
what they came up with, you give them the credit, then ideas are going to bubble up from everywhere, and people are going to really buy into your organization. And it's not going to be about being just a paycheck. They're going to feel like they actually belong, and they'll want to help your company evolve. And I assume I used to be a baseball player, right? So the same thing on a team, but just like with you as a musician, if you have that feeling of safety and trust where you can try things out and you can say things and people aren't going to, make you feel like an idiot, then I mean that's just a much better environment.
Yeah, it's like the idea, like you're working on the floor. Like I lived in Japan, and I worked, and there's a lot of ideas where if things came from the floor, came from the guys working on the production floor. Just because somebody has like a master's degree, a PhD in engineering, doesn't mean they weren't going to listen to the guys putting it together. Because the guys putting it together, they might have a better idea, and you get tunnel vision. The engineer might have tunnel vision, and when somebody says they're like, "Hey, this really isn't working. We're seeing a lot of problems with this," and this, you got to take the ego out of it. Like, and I think some people get their acronym against their name. They get a lot of ego, and they don't want to hear it from somebody who doesn't have the same credential. But that doesn't mean, you know, the credential isn't always the base. It's like somebody's been on that floor doing the job. They have a lot of 10,000 hours of doing the job. And so you should listen to some of that. But like, it's just it's just levels. It's like, well, what are people willing to absorb or not, or not absorb?
Well, I think two of the most important traits that great leaders can have. And when I say a leader, I mean you don't have to necessarily lead a team. I mean, leadership starts with yourself. But two of the best traits I think are humility, just like you said, humility, and also being curious, right? Because maybe some of these engineers you're talking about, they're not curious because they think they got all the answers. But if they listen to the people on the floor, like you're talking about in Japan, and they're just kind of curious as like, well, maybe there is a better way to do this. Maybe there's a different way we can do it. And hey, I don't have all the answers, so I'm going to be humble enough to ask questions. I think asking questions is so important, and listening. I mean that's a recipe for success.
Yeah, because the problem is a lot of times you can get it back in high school, junior high. Like, how many kids really wanted to put their hand up, right?
Yeah.
To say what they didn't know or take a stab at it when they really don't know the answer, because they just the peer pressure of getting hit, and that peer pressure continues to, like, wherever you go in life. If you don't feel the safety, again, it is like that fear. If you don't feel that it's a safe environment to actually be wrong. And the thing is, like, making mistakes as an artist is how you evolve the piece of art. Right? Making mistakes as a software developer is how you evolve the system. And you have to be own up to those mistakes and actually have the lessons learned and look at what you didn't do as well as you wanted to and what you could do better. And that sometimes is painful. You don't want to look at it because, oh, we spent a lot of money going down this road. It wasn't the right road. you know
And that's a sunken cost fallacy. Sometimes you just have to realize that, hey, you know what? It's better than throwing good money after bad. Sometimes you just have to pivot and go in a different direction.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting because you talked about being on a team, like baseball team sports. I think the analogy, like in music, it's kind of a team sport in ways because, like, if you're in a band, everybody has a role. If you're in an organization, like everybody's on that team, it's a team. And it's like, is it just the star player? Is there the one getting all the shots, or is it
They
everybody
don't
that
win.
gets them into the position? Is it the whole team, or are you only going to say this one hot shot is the whole team?
And that's what you look at it, the sports teams that do really well, it's not just about one player, right? It's about they have this synergy, this collaboration, and it's everybody. Not only in basketball the starting five, but it's the other guys on the bench who are pushing these other guys to do better in practice. People know what their roles are, and they feel like. I mean, that's what one of the things I loved about Bill Walsh's book, the great uh, coach for the 49ers. It's like the score will take care of itself. And the whole premise of the book really is that it's not just a star quarterback in Joe Montana. It's everybody. It's from the people working in the locker room to the announcers to the role players on special teams. Everybody
Yeah,
has their role. And if everybody's working together and going towards the same goal and vision, that's when you can be really successful.
yeah. I was talking to filmmakers, and the director always gets lauded, but it's the cameraman, it's the cinematographer, it's the lighting people, it's the guys who do the storyboards. It's like everybody
Yeah.
is how that works. And it's a team sport. I was talking to this director, an indie director, and he says, really, when you get that groove, and he felt like, and he was a musician too, and he said, sometimes when we're doing a scene, the whole team's got this groove, and it's a lot like when I'm in my band. It's the same groove. And I would think if you're playing sports and you've got that groove to that play, you keep on making these good plays and you win, right?
Yeah. And that's what I like about actors like Keanu Reeves, where you hear these stories about guys like him after The Matrix, where he would take a certain percentage of his salary and he'd give them to the lighting guys, the storyboard the people, everybody behind the scenes, and he'd walk around and thank them, and he'd say, "Hey, you know what? I know I'm the one that's getting, everybody knows and getting credit, but I couldn't do this without you." And he really believes that too, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's
It's
cool. He's a
it's the
cool guy.
whole. That's what's so cool to see individuals do that, because you can't reach that level of success just by being on your own. And it's great. I think that's another great thing about great teams and organizations, and probably bands too, is being able to show appreciation and being grateful for the other people that you have that could help you get to where you want to go.
Yeah, from the roadies to the sound guy to like
Yep.
everybody that's involved. You're the guys who are doing the design work for the stage and the lighting guys and the guys riggers. To get that show off, it's all those guys. It's all those people are all working together to get you on there on time and to have you show up right. Um, and a lot of great stars that actually, they share the spotlight with some of the people with the roadies. Um, and it also, I kind of want to pivot over to this idea of potential over experience, because a lot of times in the world today we see all these tools to get a job, and everybody's always looking for somebody who's got the right acronym, right level of experience. Are they, and I remember when I got into IT, it's like I got into a software company and I didn't have a degree in comp sci. I was a liberal arts major with a degree in sociology and political science, and I kind of did hacking stuff on the side. And in my interviews, I was able to kind of talk about my passion for kind of hacking, right, type of stuff, right? That got their interest, and then my ability to be a researcher or develop like thesis level papers, and they were looking for this intermediary role called a business analyst. And I would have never knew that the entire opportunity was even there. I just threw it as, I don't know if I can get in here, but I'm going to try. But now people want things to be so tight fits. Are they willing to allow potential over experience?
Well, what I liked what you said right there was, I don't know if I can, but I'm going to try. And for somebody who's probably interviewed 1,000 people over the years, and I talk a lot about overcoming imposter syndrome, and you know what I'd say is, like, if you look at a job posting, whether it's internally, like you're working in an organization and you want to apply for a job internally, or you look at externally, you see this job and it's like, here's the 5 job requirements, but let's say, like you said, you don't have 2 of them. My recommendation is apply anyways, please, because I can't tell you how many times I've been on an interviewing with somebody, and yeah, they don't have the degrees or the 10 years of experience in sales or product management or whatever it is, but I connected with them, right? And I could see that they would be a great fit for the values and the culture of our organization. And I like to hire people. Now, look, this isn't going to work all the time, right? So if you're
Mhm.
running a $100 million business, you can't hire a COO who has no experience, right? Okay, but in a lot of cases, you can hire somebody who's got the right aptitude and attitude. I mean, you could you could teach people skills, right?
Yeah.
What you can't teach people is grit, perseverance, and just having integrity, I think. I mean,
Mhm.
so for all your listeners out there, if just like you did with your business analyst job, even if you're not sure if you qualify or not, if it's something you really want to do, what's the worst case scenario? You apply and you don't get it.
Yeah.
So what? Go out there and give it a shot, because you're doing not only yourself a disservice, but maybe this organization who could hire a great person. Um, don't just not do it because you don't meet whatever requirements they have on some stupid job posting.
Well, the thing is, a lot of it is the ability to learn, right? So if you
100%.
show you the ability to learn, you show adaptability, right? You show that you're willing to do the hard work, that you give an example, like you in your kind of elevator speech, like you can give examples and show consequences of your actions, consequences of the things that you put time into, and a view, a point of view and execution on that point of view and that story and that passion. Like if you show that you have a passion for doing things and trying things and being innovative, um, then the organization is going to want that. Like, and we even
100%.
though it's in a different area, and how many times you see these executives from like a company that's like a Unilever that sells like detergent, and then an automobile company brings that COO into the automobile company. Like, well, that's not the same thing as a car. They don't have a mechanical engineer degree, but you brought them in because you saw some alignment, right? And so that if they can happen at that level, it can happen at other levels. That's what I'm
Uh,
saying.
a 100%. I mean, at the end of the day, I like to believe most organizations, it's about the people you have within your organization, right? I mean, the products are one thing, but it's the level of talent you have in your organization. So bring in great talent, nurture them, give them the opportunity to learn and grow, make mistakes, be innovative, be creators, and give them a roadmap to be successful.
Yeah, that's interesting. But then we get into this idea of like team versus like family. And you can get maybe it's a lot of small businesses, maybe it's like family or people have a mindset that they have this idea of family. And I was a sociology major, so you get the concept of the family. You're trying to get this alignment with your worldview or your company mottos or your direction. But should people really be thinking about team rather than family?
So, as a business leader, as a small business owner, or running a team or enterprise organization, I think it is your responsibility to put an elite team on the field at all times. I think you owe that to your customers. You owe that to the employees of your organization. And I've run my business for 30 years, and I'll admit that I made a mistake. Early on, it was I was very loyal to certain people, and those people sometimes hit their ceiling. And I was treating them more as a family than as a team. But we all know it's like we can't fire Uncle Bob from our Thanksgiving dinner, right? Uncle Bob is always going to be your Uncle Bob. But I think great leaders and great CEOs realize that you owe it to your organization to put the best people on the field at all time. You should look at it as a team. I mean, I've got stories of individuals who left Learnit. I mean, they hit their capacity at Learnit, and they said, "Hey, you know what, Damon? Thanks for everything that you did for me here, but I'm out." Right. So, I
Mhm.
mean, I didn't hold it against them. I'm happy for them. I've also had individuals who I got this one guy, Jim Millay, I'm godfather for two of his kids. I talk about this in my book. He worked with me for 16, 17 years. He's one of the best instructors we ever had, Microsoft Office instructor, Python, all that kind of stuff. And I said, Jim, you're just kind of dialing it in these days. I mean, it's like I can see you just don't have the same passion anymore. And he's like, yeah, you're right, D, but I also, it's hard to go out there and find a new job. And I said, well, we need to find a way for you to transition out in the next 3 to 6 months. And he's like, yeah, it's gonna be very uncomfortable. But he did, and now he's working somewhere else and he's super successful. And it's just one of those situations where, I want to be loyal to him, but I know what's best for him and what's best for my organization, and I need to keep my organization in mind. And so in that case, it worked out best for both of us. He moved on, he got out of his comfort zone, found something else, and we brought in somebody else who's fresh and excited about the role that they're doing. So yeah, I don't think that you should look at it as a family. I think you should look at it as your responsibility to put the elite team on the field at all times.
I think that's important to kind of look at your what are you value are you adding to your customers, and loyalty is a certain value to a certain extent, but if it interferes with the value proposition, with like your ability, your return on investment, your profitability, your efficiency, be able to move into markets, like if you get stagnant, like people like you're, they say, phoning it in.
Yeah.
When you feel like I always refer to this idea from like David Bowie. He pointed out that he did, as an artist, he felt like he had to tread water artistically or he wasn't happy. They needed to push himself into different genres, different things, that so he wasn't phoning it in,
Yeah.
because he didn't feel that. Yeah, and a lot of people, you get to stick to the same basically formula. And a lot of times in the arts, we will do it. We're like, if you get a formula that works, just stick with it. It's like an algorithm that works, stick with it. Don't push it because you want to stay in that sweet spot. But innovators will go to the outer edges of that. And
Miles
sometimes,
Davis did, right? Didn't
yeah,
Miles Davis?
he
He
came,
I
came
read,
out, yeah,
yeah,
totally. I mean,
I read
he's
his biography. Yeah.
the king of bebop, king of
Yeah.
a form that people think is jazz. Goes into fusion, and people were yelling at him like Bob Dylan, saying he's Judas. They were
Yeah.
like, when Dylan went electric, the folkies went crazy because here's this guy, and they say, "Oh, he's echoing Arlo Guthrie, Pete Seeger, and all this," and suddenly he shifts. And when people who are in the canon shift, there is amazing feedback loops. People are just like, "Oh, it's terrible." They hate it. They
Yeah.
hate it. But a lot of times you have the artists like Lou Reed to say, if they hate it, then I'm doing a good job.
Yeah. I mean, all those artists you mentioned. I mean, Bowie. I never got to see him live. I wish I would have. I've seen Bob Dylan, but they're innovators, and because you see these other bands out there, who just dial it in, who phone it in. They make the same album time after time again, and you got to give these guys credit. The Bowies and Miles Davises of the world, who don't care what other people think about them. They're going to do what interests them, and like you said, it keeps them passionate about their art.
Yeah, because it's not always like, the thing is people think things are sequential. Like, so just because like you could, if you repeat the hit, right, you get the guaranteed fame, money, whatever. If the next thing comes in and it doesn't hit the mark, doesn't mean that it's not a success. It's preparing you for the next stage. It's like the Prince was like this.
I was
Prince,
just going to say Prince was the best.
he's at that. Purple Rain hit like 8 million.
Yeah.
Round the World in a Day is like 2 million. Warner's always a failure. It's a failure. It's like, no, I can't
Sign of the
go and
Times.
do Purple Rain 2, 3, 4, 5. Not doing that.
Yeah.
He's not doing that. He wouldn't do it. He changed, like the Beatles. He was going with this idea, I'm going to evolve. And we either come with me or you don't. Right. But I need to evolve because that's not I need to be. He's 17 when he got into it. It's like, why am I going to just stay there doing like a 70-year-old? I could just do that. He didn't want to do that. I mean, a lot of people don't want to do that. They need to get out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, I think I like to tell a lot of people that the best thing you could do is get comfortable with being uncomfortable,
Mm.
and being comfortable with failure. Because you mentioned it earlier, and it's really the truth. If you want to grow as an individual or you want to grow as an organization, then you're going to have to make some mistakes. You're going to have some failures, and they're all important learning opportunities. Um, because, like you said, with Prince, maybe Around the World in a Day wasn't the best album in the world. I actually, Raspberry Beret is one of my favorite songs of all time. But look what it probably led to, whether it was Sign of the Times or other albums he made.
Yeah.
You know, and but you're not really going to know until you try things. So you just have to get out of your comfort zone and see what happens.
Problem is people like to stay in narrow lanes. A lot of times innovators will cross pollinate. So you think like, guys would like they'll mix a little jazz with rock, or they'll mix classical with popular music. Like so like you get a progressive rock band, like a Yes. A lot of what they were doing coming from classical capabilities, right? A lot of progressive rock bands like Genesis and Yes, and Pink Floyd were bringing in a lot of movements, timing changes, structures like suites, rock opera type stuff that's not pop music. It's not pop music at all. It's something else. But you bring it in when you try different things, then you get unique results and you evolve. Like in tech today, we're evolving from where we were to the AI and the blockchain technologies,
Yeah,
which
I think,
freaking
I
out a lot of people.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think tech and AI, and I'm happy to talk about that. I'm a huge fan of AI, but I'm just kind of curious. Do you think going back to music for a second? Do you think music's evolving, or
Oh, yeah. Well,
like
music has hit a problem where well, it's not a problem. It's a problem to some people because I had a guy on that was talking about the democratization of music, the ability of somebody who's not going to like a music seminary to actually be able to put together a record. You can, if you have a digital audio workstation, you have a laptop, you have plugins, you can do something that you would have had to go to Atlantic Studios, you would have had to go to Electric Lady. There was a gatekeeper. You couldn't get in there. Now you have people in their bedroom with tools can actually put something together that you couldn't have done 20 years ago. So then that means you don't have to be Jimi Hendrix. You don't have to be Joni Mitchell. You don't have to be Bob Dylan. That would be good if you could write lyrics. but like in terms of your music production, you have ability to get things out there. And so there's like I still think there's a place for the musician that's a dedicated, like a fusion jazz musician. I think people still want to see somebody who's dedicated to the craft. But there's this other place for other people, and it's bringing different visions. So it's a different world.
yeah, I guess maybe I'm just old school, but I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, who are my kids? Pearl Jam or the Killers or
Yeah.
Nirvana or Guns N' Roses? I mean, all of these different Prince. Are they gonna have those type of musicians to look forward to in 20 years? But I see what you're saying about the different tools and people be able to get creative and put stuff out there. It's just different,
Yeah, I still am a big fan of the Hendrixian or the Miles Davis or a Sun Ra. Yeah, I still believe. And the problem with our industry today is there are bands out there I find like that are doing really good work, except the algorithms aren't pushing them to the top.
right?
I find bands all over the world. I interview emerging artists all the time that actually are doing stuff at the level of 1960s, 70s work, right? But no, they're not getting the press because that's not what's hot. There's like our social media and the TikToks are driving what's hot. And the kids are growing up where their attention span wasn't to listen to a vinyl,
Right.
right? To listen to Pink Floyd all the way in the basement like me, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go and listen to the thing both sides. They don't
Me
have
too.
the attention span to do that, to go and listen to a Miles Davis record when you're 21. I was like, why would I do that? Like,
Yeah.
that's not, they don't do that. So it's like if they're not doing that, then they don't appreciate that craft. I think eventually people start to get bored. And there are some numbers saying people are going back and listening really heavily to stuff from the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah, I
So
hope so.
that tells me that actually even younger people demographics are going back. So that tells you that eventually somebody's gonna figure out that maybe you want, like, a professional musician.
Yeah, I mean, I just think I got a bunch of 20 somethings that work for me, and we were on a business trip in Atlanta, and Elton John was playing down the street, and I asked him, I said, "Hey, anybody want to go with me to see Elton John?" And half the crew didn't know who Elton John was.
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's a
"What
hard
world do we
thing.
live in?"
That's a hard thing to deal with. Yeah, I got he's I mean, I'm a child of the '70s, so I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's like people have such a divided attention span, and that's probably part of like learning today is like, can you actually focus? Can you get the focus in to do the dedicated work that has to get done when there's too much noise? Do you run into that as a, trying to get people to like level up is can you dedicate yourself to actually learning, you know, and not just jumping from thing to thing, but actually learning something to have a complete thought, right? To actually have a valued opinion, to be able to consult and put it together because you actually took the time to actually explore it.
Yeah, I think you can. You just have to have the discipline to do so, you know? I mean, a lot of times people will say, "Oh, I don't have time to read a book," right? I don't have, I just don't have time to read a book. I'll say, "Okay." And a couple of minutes later, I'll ask them, "Have you seen any good shows on Netflix?" And they'll reel off like 4 or 5 shows, you know? And then I'm thinking to myself, "Okay, well, instead of binging Netflix, just put aside 25 minutes, have the discipline, like read 25 minutes a day. That's it. That's
Yeah,
all you have to do, right?" I mean, I think if it's something you want, whether it's to eat healthy, exercise, or to learn and evolve, then you can find and will find the time to make it happen. Now, I do my book's called The Learn It All Leader, and my company's called Learn It. I don't want you to think that I'm all about like all you do is learning because
mhm,
there's a great saying, learning without doing is treason. I love that.
you have to
So
do it.
it's you have to execute. You have to get results, So whether you're taking a class or let's say you're reading a business book, you should be thinking to yourself, okay, well, how does this apply to my life?
Actionable,
What can I
actionable.
do? What's actionable? Like when I listen to this podcast, what can I take from this podcast that I can apply into my real world experience? So I think learning is beautiful and it's great, but at the end of the day, too, you can't just go from course to course to book. You need to get out there and roll up your sleeves and actually get some of the work done.
Yeah, execute. I run into a
Execute.
lot of artists okay, you're taking all this ability, you're doing all this practice,
Yeah.
but did you actually put anything down? I've
Right.
run into guys like doing nothing but runs, practicing all day, and it's okay, like that's great. You're keeping up your chops, but have you actually put down any tunes?
Yeah.
So what's the point in just keeping your chops? Like, okay, if you're playing live, that's fine.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like as a musician, to me, it's like I'm a writing musician. So I'm part of my practice, I'm actually putting something down.
Yeah.
And
And you have stuff out there on Spotify, I saw, right?
yeah, yeah, I
Where you
put a
put
lot
it you put it out to the world. I have a buddy who he loves playing guitar and he's in the band, but all they do is practice, practice, practice. I'm like, when are you guys going to do a gig?
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, oh, we're still working on it. I said, look, we're not going to know the difference between you being perfect and not being perfect. Better done than perfect. Get out there and just play at the local freaking,
yeah.
I don't
Like
know,
Joey
local
Ramone and
bar.
the Ramones. Well, my whole thing was
Yeah.
the punk aesthetic was very appealing to me as a '70s kid because I grew up with the perfect pitch, right? With the Motown guys,
Yeah.
with Robert Plant, with Roger Daltrey. You get the Queen, Freddie Mercury. Yeah, there's a certain level of expertise to the lead singer. But I loved when Joe Strummer and Joey Ramone,
Awesome. Joe
those guys
Strummer.
showed up because I'm like, you know what? There's something about that punk aesthetic that I really appreciated. And I dove into a lot of indie bands like the REMs, the Husker Doos, like a lot of I mean, like Black Flag. I got into it, Henry Rollins, all this stuff. It's like why? Because there was an attitude with the punk aesthetic.
Yeah.
Eventually, you get like a Talking Heads came out of that kind of punk aesthetic. You get like a David Byrne, and you say, "Well, what the heck is that?" Because you're willing to push it, right?
Yeah.
If you're willing to push it, then you get like a stop making sense. You get that thing. It's like, where'd that come from? Because you gave it a chance. That
Yeah.
you allowed it to happen at CBGBs. You had Blondie, you had, you know, all these bands together, television, the Ramones. Like they're all different. They're not the same. They're not clones of each other. They're all willing to have their own point of view, their own style in the same room.
And that's what I think is so great. And a couple of the bands that you mentioned too, that you didn't mention them, but I really love too, are like the Chili Peppers
Yeah.
and Social Distortion, and they just kind of get out there and hit you in the face with it. And like you said, they just try, and they just out there trying things, getting out of their comfort zone and trying things.
Yeah, just throwing it at the wall. It's like I loved about the Velvet Underground Lou Reed. Then, I'm a poet, and he put it to words, and then that created like a whole alternative radio of bands that were inspired by the Velvets because he was willing to say, "Hey, I'm a poet," like a Dylan. He came out there with as like why would that work? Because it worked, right? Like you can actually come out there and it's like it's the words, it's the story, right?
It's the words of the story. Yeah, that's
That actually has something to do with it. It's not just the hook. It's
yeah.
actually the meat of the story that means something.
And that's what I love. That's what I love so much about music and musicians, and it's just kind of getting yourself even wrapped up in the story of what they're talking about or what they're doing, and how they put it out there.
I think people have to learn, in order for you to progress as a human being, you have to learn how to be an advocate for your own story, right?
100%.
And once you realize what story you want to be in, then you start to align like through a law of attraction kind of idea. 'Cause I'm a Buddhist, but the idea is like if I gravitate toward the things that resonate, then I'm going to probably have more success than if I think I just going to be out there just fighting everything. Like if I try to align with things that are in my wheelhouse or where I think I should be, and even if I fail trying to get to it, I can step through the rungs of the ladder and get there.
Yeah, and you could always just grow and evolve. But I also think that you don't want to tie your identity up into one thing all the time. And I talk about that a lot. Like my whole life, I wanted to be a baseball player, right? I wanted to be that's all I wanted to do. I was a baseball player, and I got pretty far, got drafted a couple times and everything. But at 22, when my baseball career ended, I kind of lost my identity. Like, well, who am I? I mean, because I only thought I was a baseball player. But what I learned, and I think this is important for your listeners, if you lose a job or your sports career ends, everything I learned playing baseball has been transferable into my next phase of my life, right? So I didn't realize that at the time, but learning about discipline and learning agility that you learn so much for in sports and problem solving and collaboration, those are all skills. And so don't get yourself wrapped up in like this is just your identity and then what am I going to do now? It's like, okay, my identity is somebody who is a good person, who has integrity, who can grow and evolve in different ways, right? So you get off one train track, you get on the next and keep moving forward.
I think a lot of people also they're people are not real one dimensional. Even if they focus, they say I am this. A lot of times you are many things, and you want to wear that hat because that's what people understand. If you're in the elevator pitch, what do you do? If you tell them you do 10 things, well, they get bored. They want to know who you are, right? But the idea is like a lot of people are very multifaceted. And it's just whether or not you start to dig into those facets or you'll have that looking glass self review. It's like, hey, yeah, I do like all these aspects. And then how can you thread the needle with all these things? Like, I started to see like art and science and music and, software design and, and then communication. Can you thread the needle with all that? Well, you can. But like, if you want to just say you're one thing, that's what you want to say. But you a lot of times like, you're a father, you're a brother, you're somebody's uncle, you're a lot of things.
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
I agree. And I think that being a little bit more well-rounded, if that's what you want to call it. I mean, I just think it makes life a little bit more exciting as well, too, right? So don't pigeonhole yourself into one thing. Again, like we talked about, be curious, explore. Try things. I think you sometimes you try things that you have no idea that you end up enjoying, or I'm a big believer you could learn something from everybody. Like,
Mhm.
I used to, my wife likes to go to parties and meet different people. And like, I don't necessarily love it, but I have my buddies, I like my friends. But I think one thing anybody would say about me is you could drop Damon in any room and I can get along with people just because I'll just ask questions. I'll be talking because I can learn something from anybody. And I'm not afraid. Like, I don't know much about, let's say, crypto. If I'm talking to somebody who's big into crypto, I might just say, "Hey, I don't know that much about crypto. Can you talk to me a little bit about it?"
Mhm.
And if you just actively listen, you could learn. And I just think it makes you evolve as a person. By going out and exploring and being open to understanding different things.
I think like the oral history, is a big method of how humans have always learned. And I love the podcast form because, I feel like the 1,000 episodes I've done is like a master class in humanity, right?
Oh,
Because
I
every
mean,
time I talk to somebody, I get a different point of view, and it builds up like you're going to college. Like those, like when you're in a lecture hall and the professor's talking to you, right? That there's a kind of that communication, that is something that's always been done. Like whether you're in that college setting or not, you got like Native Americans, like given their oral histories, indigenous people, like Africans. Like there's a tradition like indigenous people that's what is done. So learning through speaking and listening, right, to the words beyond what the words, the deeper meaning of the words, the context of the words.
you've done a thousand podcasts. I've done like 150. But one thing I'm curious to see what you think. One thing that I've seen is it's made me become a better communicator. I just feel like I'm a better conversationalist from conducting 150 interviews. Do you kind of feel the same
I
way?
think it's like the 10,000 hours. Like if you think about it, like I got better at my piano. And once I hit like 10,000, I go way over it. But like you do something, like if people like you talk to life coaches, like you remap your brain, if you remap your thing, it's actually repetition. Like the same way an athlete has to practice that 3-point shot, you actually got to practice like mindset.
Yeah.
If you don't do it, you lose it. If you don't, but if you actually listen all the time and have a back and forth communication with people, I found in my business, I've done way better in my day job from my side gig because I actually go into meetings, I actually hear my coworkers, I actually hear what they really mean instead of projecting what I want them to say.
Right, and you've done that because from learning how to do it from the podcast, I assume.
Yeah, and before that, I was an Uber driver, and I picked up conversation by for 5 years being an Uber driver before I had the guts to do the podcast. So being a cab driver, you kind of be a like, armchair psychologist.
Yeah,
You're listening to the person taking them to the airport, and they're talking to you about their life,
yeah,
and then you're like, wow, and then you learn how to actually communicate with them. And then
yeah.
once I did that for 5 years, I said, "Oh, I guess I could do a podcast because 'cause I'm talking to these people in the car. I can move that into a different zone."
And now you've done 1,000 of them. You should be super proud of yourself.
Yeah, I just fell into it because I find people say, "Well, doesn't it take away from other things you're doing?" I said, "No, it adds to it. It adds to my if you're a writer, what do you have to do as a writer? You observe things around you. The more people you talk to, the more observations you get.
Yeah,
So as a writer, I write all the time. I still write tons of music. I got like 2 records in the can on top of doing the podcast, top of doing my job. I find it gives me motivation to not that I'm lazy, but I find I like to be involved in doing things rather than not doing things.
yeah. That's awesome. I mean, first of all, it's amazing consistency to get to 1,000. Because for those of you out there who are just listening, it's not easy. It's not easy to do podcasts and you do have to put yourself out there, right? I mean, especially if you put them on video and audio, so um yeah, I kudos to you for doing that.
And I like to do it live because I think it's like a jazz fusion feel.
Yeah,
I actually feel better about being kind of thrown on stage and know I can't cut it. It's like it's like in a real time. I know some people don't like that. I've had people like don't want to be on the show because they want to be able to edit every little
Yeah.
thing. And I'm
mean,
like,
I grew up playing baseball. I played for in front of 25,000 people. You can't edit that. You know what I mean? So
yeah, yeah,
you
you
just
got it.
have to,
You in a real time.
you have to kind of be on your toes, or you have to, even going back to what we talked about the notes earlier on, you got to be able to just kind of move and evolve with it. Right. It's
Yeah.
just you got to kind of be able to go with it. That's what
Right.
makes it fun and exciting about life.
Could you practice those plays, but you got to be able to deal with the thing that happens. So you
Yeah.
don't want to be sitting there like I can't figure out what to do because I didn't practice that. I
Cause
didn't know that that was going to happen.
yeah, one of my favorite lines of all time is Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face, right? So you just because you practice a play 1,000 times, right? This is going to happen, this can happen, or you work on a presentation for a big sales deal, but then somebody throws you a curveball, so you got to know how to adjust, and that goes back to the learning and adaptability and curiosity we talked about.
Yeah, kind of like the in the moment flow state. Like, you could have your plan, but if the universe throws something at you, can you react? Can't do you have it in your toolbox that even if you don't fully recognize it, you can still make a decision, right? You can still not just react to it, you can actually, use it and mold it and actually, feel like you're not unsafe, feel like you're not on, like that you are prepared, that as much as you can be, that you can handle it, that you can take that scenario, like you want the general who's been in the battle, that's
Right.
been working with the guerrillas and kind of knows the things that can get crazy, but he doesn't act like he's out of control. He knows what to do for what's going on. And you're like, wow, how does he do that?
Yeah, no,
Because
I think partially how he does it, yeah, one, he has experience or she has experience, but also, you got to be able to keep your emotions in check. You can't get too ahead of yourself. You got to be able to take a step back and really reflect on, okay, that's the kind of leader you want to follow, right? You want to follow somebody who doesn't necessarily have all the answers, but they're going to find a way to get through it somehow,
yeah, that they got the ability to understand that life can throw a curveball and I can react to it and I'm not just going to fall apart.
Yeah.
When something comes that's just unexpected, that's where, and you still could have, you might not fully, do what the perfect game, right? But you were able to manage it. You maybe you could save it. You were starting to slip and then you saved it. And people saw you slip and then you still came out of it. Then you're like, wow. But you could slip and then maybe not make out, but the next day you look at the tapes, you review it, you're honest, and you say, well, hey, now I put this in my playbook. Now I got that.
And that is so much, and I'm wondering if it's like this for music too, but that is so much in sports. There's that old saying, um, uh, nine, 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 10 cent, 10 cent head, $1 million body, in sports where it's like some of the best baseball players I ever played with, um, talent wise, in batting practice, they'd hit balls 400, 500 feet. But once the game started, if somebody threw them a curveball and their mindset, they were spun out for the rest of the day,
But
right?
no,
And
they
they and
got
they and
knocked out.
they couldn't recover,
Yeah,
so
recovery's low.
it, and that's why, whether it's work or even in sports, it's like a lot of it is the mindset you have that goes along with it. Like you said, hey, things may not be going perfect, but I'm going to have the grit or perseverance to reverse this course and turn it around. I'm not just going to throw in the towel and give up.
Yeah, and that reminds me of, like, Bob Dylan when he went electric and, they told him, like, he or Judas, they hated their booing, throwing stuff, and he said, "I don't believe you," and kept on playing.
Yeah.
It's actually on the tape. It's like, "I don't believe you," and he kept on going. Now that's hard. There's a lot of people, they get booed, people throwing tomatoes, like, they're done. They walk off, they slump off. It's like, "No, I'm going full bore into what I believe in," and, in '66, people didn't get it. By '74, he was filling stadiums with it. The
Oh
same
yeah.
song,
I mean,
the same style. It's like sometimes you're a little ahead of the curve
yeah. That happened to Prince, right? Prince got
yeah,
booed off the stage when he
with the
opened up for the
Stones.
Rolling Stones. Yeah.
Yeah, they hated him. They were
They
throwing stuff. They
hated him. Yeah.
hated it. And then Purple Rain comes along. They're cheering. It's like he stuck to his guns, kept on going in the direction, This like, hey, this isn't the right place, but I'm not going to change the directional focus. I'm going to go with this idea of being
Yeah.
a little, outrageous kind of glam slam thing. You're like, yeah,
Well,
and I mean, it.
I think the magic in all that is just for Dylan or Prince or Michael Jordan or whoever, it's just having that inner confidence in yourself, um, and just kind of blocking out what other people are saying and just thinking, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I believe in. It's kind of like the opening question you have, like, what motivates you? It's like, this is what I do. This is what I'm going to believe in, and I'm going to make it happen. Come hell or high water.
Yeah, you make it happen for people because you have your podcast, and on your podcast, do you talk to guests, or is it like just yourself, or how do
No,
you do?
I talk to get I bring in it's called the Learn It All podcast, and I bring in different leaders, uh, and try to have them share their stories and want to tie learning into it. Like, so what about your career journey? What are some areas that you learned from mistakes, and being a high performance, bringing people who are high performers at different, whether it's sports or the business world, and just
Mhm.
try to understand their stories. And a lot of times it's like, I want our guests to understand that it's like, hey, these people can do it, so can you. So here are their stories, and here's them being vulnerable and some things that didn't work out, and things you could learn from.
Well, I think that's great because when people are willing to be a little vulnerable, I think that's when people feel it's authentic. That's
Totally.
why I like this kind of form as a podcast. If you go and do a form where it doesn't feel like an infomercial,
Yeah.
doesn't feel staged, doesn't
Yeah.
feel kind of preset. They feels like, hey, I'm actually getting some nuggets. This guy's actually showing, letting their hair down. Like they're showing me like who they really are. They're saying like, hey, it's not always perfect. Then people feel like that's legitimate. That's real. That speaks to you. Then they feel like they can they're like they there's a kinship, there's a connection. They can understand it. They can see a parallel, right? Then you're
Yep.
gonna get more people wanting to talk to you.
Yeah, I don't think anybody. I think infomercials get boring after a while. Somebody who's always trying to push, whether it's their book or their services or something that they're doing. And at the end of the day, I think people connect with people who they think are genuine, authentic, and aren't afraid to be vulnerable.
So your website, learnitallleader.com, if people connect to that, and they will be able to click through on that once we're fully published. But yeah, what happens if people click on that?
Yeah, well, learn it all leader.com. That's my personal website. It's got my podcast and everything on there. The other website, you should go to is learnit.com.
Hmm.
And if any of your listeners find a class on there that they want, I'll give it to them for free. Whether you want to learn it, take a class on having difficult conversation or emotional intelligence, or even how to use Excel, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, Damon Lembi on LinkedIn, and I will give you a free live class. I mean, the classes are $250, but you should take me up on it.
So it's like that, learn.com. That's the one
Yeah,
name.
yeah,
Yeah.
learnit.com.
Yeah. So yeah, I put that out there. That will be out there as well. And yeah, I want to thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. It always goes by quicker than we ever imagined. We were just live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will be published on all the other platforms where you can listen to a podcast or watch it, like YouTube or Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon. By tomorrow, we will provide a landing page for everybody to pick whatever platform they like. And I want to thank you again for being a guest on the show.
I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Keep up the great work.
thank you.